Did the recent Georgia school shooting expose deeper issues in our system? And who is Colt Gray, the name that's grabbing headlines everywhere? In today's video, we're breaking down the facts, uncovering the truth behind the incident, and asking the tough questions. Stay tuned to find out what really happened and why it matters to all of us. Welcome to Sizzle Buzz. Today we delve into a story that has chilled the nation to its core, a story that raises unsettling questions about the darkness that can reside in seemingly ordinary lives. This is the disturbing world of Colt Gray, what we know now. Colt Gray, a name forever etched in the annals of American tragedy, a name synonymous with a school shooting that ripped apart the very fabric of a small town. How could someone so young harbor such unimaginable violence? Join us as we journey into the heart of this chilling case, peeling back the layers of Colt Gray's life, his motivations, and the horrifying events that unfolded on that fateful day. Imagine a place where children once skipped down sun-dappled sidewalks, their laughter echoing through the streets. Now, picture that same town shrouded in the suffocating silence of shock and grief. This is Appalachia, Georgia, a town forever scarred by the actions of one young man. The idyllic facade has been shattered, replaced by the chilling reality of a school shooting that has left an indelible mark on the community. The air is thick with unanswered questions. Who was Colt Gray? What drove him to commit such a heinous act? And what can we learn from this tragedy to prevent such horrors from happening again? The story of Colt Gray is not just about the day of the shooting. It's about the days, weeks, and months leading up to it. It's about piecing together the fragments of a life gone terribly wrong, a descent into darkness that culminated in an act of unspeakable violence. Our investigation will take us deep into Colt Gray's world. We'll examine his family life, his social interactions, his online activity, searching for any clues that might shed light on the darkness that consumed him. The journey ahead will be disturbing, unsettling, and at times deeply troubling. But it is a journey we must take if we are to understand the complexities of this case and the urgent need to address the root causes of youth violence in our society. It was a day like any other at Appalachia High. Students shuffled through the hallways, their backpacks slung over their shoulders, their minds preoccupied with the mundane routines of school life. Little did they know that their world was about to be turned upside down. At approximately 10:30 a.m., the first gunshots rang out, piercing the air like shards of glass. The sharp staccato bursts echoed through the corridors, sending shockwaves of terror through the school. The initial moments were a blur of confusion and disbelief. Students and teachers alike froze, their minds struggling to comprehend the horrifying reality that was unfolding around them. Panic set in as the realization dawned that this was no drill, no false alarm. The sound of gunfire was unmistakable, and it was getting closer. Students scrambled for cover, hiding under desks, cowering in closets, their hearts pounding in their chests. Colt Gray, armed with a high-powered rifle and a seemingly endless supply of ammunition, moved through the school with a chilling sense of purpose. Witnesses described him as calm, almost robotic, his eyes devoid of emotion as he squeezed off round after round. The hallways, once bustling with life, were now transformed into a scene of unimaginable chaos and carnage. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, the floor littered with broken glass, textbooks, and the scattered belongings of terrified students. The shooting spree lasted an excruciating 8 minutes, 8 minutes that felt like an eternity to those trapped inside the school. By the time the first responders arrived, the damage had been done. The scene that greeted them was nothing short of a nightmare. The hallways were eerily silent, the air heavy with the stench of blood and gunpowder. The wounded lay scattered among the dead, their cries for help echoing through the desolate corridors. In the aftermath of the shooting, the community of Appalachia was left reeling. The death toll was staggering, the number of injured even higher. But the true cost of Colt Gray's rampage went far beyond the physical wounds inflicted that day. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, investigators descended upon Appalachia High School, determined to piece together the events that led to the tragedy. Their task was daunting: to make sense of the senseless, to find reason in the midst of chaos. The crime scene was sprawling, encompassing classrooms, hallways, and the school's exterior. Every inch of the building was meticulously examined, every bullet casing and bloodstain documented. It was a grim and painstaking process, but one that was essential to building a comprehensive picture of what transpired that day. As the investigation unfolded, a team of detectives began interviewing witnesses, students, and staff who had experienced the horror firsthand. Their accounts, though fragmented and often contradictory, offered valuable insights into Colt Gray's movements and demeanor during the shooting. In today's digital age, the search for answers often leads investigators online, and the case of Colt Gray was no exception. Detectives obtained warrants to search his computer, phone, and social media accounts, hoping to uncover any clues that might shed light on his motive. What they found was a disturbing tapestry of anger, resentment, and isolation. Colt's online activity revealed a troubled young man who felt ostracized and misunderstood. His social media posts were filled with dark and violent imagery, suggesting a deep-seated rage that was simmering beneath the surface. Of particular interest to investigators was Colt's activity in online forums and chat rooms frequented by individuals with extremist views. While it remains unclear whether Colt himself subscribed to any specific ideology, his engagement with these groups raised concerns about the potential influence of online radicalization. The question that haunted investigators, and indeed the entire community, was a simple yet agonizing one. Why? What drove Colt Gray to commit such a horrific act of violence? Was it a sudden outburst of rage, or the culmination of a long and festering resentment? As the investigation progressed, certain themes began to emerge. Interviews with Colt's classmates and teachers painted a picture of a lonely and withdrawn individual who struggled to fit in. He was often the target of bullying, both online and in person, and his social isolation seemed to deepen over time. Colt's family life also came under scrutiny. His parents, described as quiet and reserved, were reportedly unaware of the extent of their son's troubles. They insisted that Colt was a good boy, a bright student who had never shown any signs of violence. However, some neighbors and acquaintances suggested that there were underlying tensions within the family, hinting at a darker reality behind closed doors. A sound of old film projector starting up, accompanied by a haunting melody. To understand the darkness that consumed Colt Gray, we must journey back to his beginnings, to the small town of Appalachia, Georgia, where his story began. Colt's childhood home, a modest ranch-style house on a quiet cul-de-sac, now stands empty, a silent testament to the tragedy that unfolded. Neighbors describe the Grays as a private family, keeping to themselves for the most part. Colt, an only child, was often seen playing alone in his yard, his solitary figure a familiar sight to those who passed by. Some recalled him as a quiet and introspective child, while others remembered a darker side, a quick temper that flared easily. School records paint a picture of a student who struggled academically and socially. Colt's grades were consistently below average, and he had difficulty connecting with his peers. Teachers noted his withdrawn demeanor and lack of participation in class. But there were no major disciplinary issues to suggest the violence that lay dormant within him. As Colt grew older, his social isolation deepened. he became increasingly withdrawn, spending countless hours alone in his room, his only solace the virtual world of video games and online forums. It was in this digital realm that Colt found a sense of belonging and acceptance that eluded him in the real world. Colt's online activity became increasingly disturbing over time. He gravitated towards violent video games, immersing himself in virtual worlds where death and destruction were commonplace. His social media posts grew darker, filled with nihilistic ramblings and disturbing imagery. Concerned friends and family members who noticed these changes dismissed them as teenage angst or a harmless fascination with the macabre. Little did they know that Colt's online persona was a reflection of a deep-seated rage and despair that was festering within him. In hindsight, there were warning signs, red flags that hinted at the darkness brewing beneath Colt's quiet exterior. But these signs were often subtle, easily overlooked or dismissed by those who knew him. One incident in particular stands out. During his sophomore year of high school, Colt wrote a disturbing short story for an English class assignment. The story, which depicted a school shooting in graphic detail, sent chills down the spines of his classmates and teacher. When confronted about the disturbing content of his writing, Colt claimed it was purely fictional, a product of his imagination. The school counselor, alerted to the situation, met with Colt and his parents, but ultimately concluded that he posed no immediate threat to himself or others. The question of what transforms an ordinary individual into a school shooter is a complex and multifaceted one with no easy answers. In Colt Gray's case, it appears to have been a perfect storm of factors that converged to create the monster he became. Colt's social isolation, his history of bullying, his exposure to violent media, and his apparent mental struggles all likely played a role in his descent into darkness. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of his case is the realization that there was no single defining moment, no clear-cut explanation for his actions. Colt Gray's story is a chilling reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, often hidden in plain sight. It is a story that demands our attention, not only to understand the motivations behind such acts of violence, but also to identify and address the warning signs before it's too late. News of the Appalachia High School shooting spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves of grief, anger, and disbelief across the nation and beyond. The images of the school, once a symbol of youthful innocence and promise, now transformed into a scene of unimaginable tragedy, filled television screens and dominated headlines. Social media became a digital outpouring of grief, with hashtags like Appalachia Strong and Pray for Appalachia trending worldwide. People from all walks of life, united by shared horror and empathy, reached out to express their condolences and support for the victims, their families, and the shattered community. Yet amidst the outpouring of sympathy, a sense of outrage simmered. How could such a senseless act of violence occur, once again in a place meant to nurture and educate? The familiar cries for stricter gun control and improved mental health resources echoed, fueled by a collective frustration that such tragedies continued to plague the nation. The media descended upon Appalachia in a frenzy, eager to feed the insatiable appetite for information surrounding the tragedy. Reporters camped outside the school, microphones thrust towards anyone remotely connected to the event, seeking first-hand accounts and heartbreaking details. Cable news channels ran 24/7 coverage, dissecting every aspect of the shooting, the victims, and the perpetrator. Experts and commentators weighed in, offering their perspectives on gun control, school safety, and the motivations behind such acts of violence. The line between responsible reporting and sensationalism blurred, with some outlets accused of exploiting the tragedy for ratings. As the investigation unfolded, leaks and rumors filled the void where official information was lacking. Unconfirmed reports about Colt Gray's past, his family life, and his online activity circulated widely, painting a distorted and often contradictory picture of the young man behind the trigger. In the wake of the shooting, the once tight-knit community of Appalachia found itself grappling with a complex mix of emotions, grief, anger, fear, and a profound sense of loss. The tragedy had exposed raw wounds and deep divisions within the town, pitting neighbor against neighbor in a heated debate about gun control, mental health, and personal responsibility. Some residents, their hearts heavy with grief and anger, demanded stricter gun control measures, arguing that easier access to firearms had made the tragedy more likely. Others, equally heartbroken, clung to their Second Amendment rights, viewing any attempt at gun control as an infringement on their freedoms. The debate spilled over into town hall meetings, school board gatherings, and even church services. The tragedy had forced the community to confront uncomfortable truths about itself, exposing deep-seated divisions that had long simmered beneath the surface. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the people of Appalachia struggled to come to terms with the tragedy that had befallen them. The physical wounds were slowly healing, but the emotional scars ran deep, a constant reminder of the lives lost and the innocence shattered. The search for answers, for a reason behind the senseless violence, continued. But Colt Gray, the young man who held the key to understanding, remained an enigma. His motives, his thoughts, his descent into darkness, all remained shrouded in mystery, leaving a community and a nation grappling with the chilling reality that some questions may never be answered. Sound of gavel banging followed by the murmur of voices in a courtroom. Months have passed since the horrific events at Appalachia High School, and the wheels of justice have been slow to turn. Colt Gray, now 18 years old, remains in custody, awaiting trial on multiple counts of murder and attempted murder. The families of the victims, their patience worn thin by the endless legal maneuvering, gather outside the courthouse each time Colt's case is mentioned, their faces etched with a mixture of grief, anger, and frustration, a stark reminder of the lives cut tragically short. For many, the trial represents a chance to hold Colt accountable and seek closure. The shadow of the shooting continues to loom large over Appalachia, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of trauma. The town, once a picture of small-town America, now bears the invisible scars of tragedy, its residents forever marked by the events of that day. Appalachia High School, once a bustling hub of activity, has reopened its doors, but the atmosphere remains palpably different. Security measures have been increased, with metal detectors and security cameras now a constant presence. Counselors and therapists are on hand to provide support to students and staff, but the healing process is slow and uneven. The town itself feels strangely subdued, the laughter and carefree spirit that once defined it replaced by a pervasive sense of loss and uncertainty. The shooting has left an indelible mark on the community, a wound that may never fully heal. Despite the passage of time, many questions surrounding the Appalachia High School shooting remain unanswered. What drove Colt Gray to commit such a horrific act of violence? And what, if anything, could have been done to prevent this tragedy? The search for answers has led to much soul-searching within the community. How do we prevent such tragedies from happening again? If you have not heard about the rise and fall of Wade Wilson, click here.